Welcome to our weekly group meeting for container security. Alexander, per usual, you have a couple items to demo for us.
Yeah, so the first thing is the scan execution sidebar version 1 is up on staging now. So now it parses the rules and actions, and we can see what a scan is all about without having to dig into the details of it. And there's been a couple of really great iterations on this already, and so this probably won't stay around for long, but it is something.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for working iteratively on that one.
And then the second point is there are a couple of MRs that are left. They actually just got merged last night that fix some bugs that were found, but these are the last MRs. As soon as they get merged and they get verified, and I'll run through all the sort of manual testing of creating a scan execution policy, editing, deleting, and then doing so with the other policies to make sure there are no regressions. I'll be putting up some docs and then turning on the feature flag for production, hopefully this week.
Awesome. Yeah, that's great news. I'm looking forward to announcing that. And I'm sure once we turn on that feature flag, it's going to get a lot more attention than it's had up to this point. So I'm really excited to start getting the customer feedback for this one.
Yeah, and if anybody finds anything, no one's informed me of any issues yet, besides the ones I have found, but you certainly, if you find something, please let me know and I'll get that fixed ASAP. Next, Alan.
Okay, hello. So I know that we talked about it, Sam, some time ago, about where to put the configuration for the cluster and agents and the policy itself while I was started working on it. For me, it seems more natural to have it in action itself rather than in the rule. I added my explanation in the issue I'm working on. So I'm not sure if we want to go through this right now or you want to read it and respond there asynchronously.
Yeah, we've got time, so we can talk about it. And we've got Amelia on as well, and Alexander. So yeah, I think this is a great group to discuss it with. Let me pull up. I just got in, so I've scanned this, but I have not read it thoroughly. So maybe you can walk us through your thinking here.
Okay. Maybe I'll share my screen and I'll. Okay.
That's a nice plant by you.
Thanks. I believe it's fake as well. All right, let me. All right. Okay, so here's something that Brian okay, so I hope you can see it. So this is what we proposed initially, that we're going to have cluster configuration or agent configuration with the rule itself. And my proposal is actually to move that section. So instead of having it here, whenever we have cluster image scanning here, we will add the configuration for the analyzer itself. So what cluster should we use? What kind of namespaces should we scan and so on here instead of having it in roles. So we're doing similar thing for DAST, for example. Whenever we have scan DAST, we're telling, oh, use that DAST profile and so on. So this is like the configuration that is supplied to the scan itself. So I believe we've discussed that in the past. I don't remember what was the outcomes of our discussion, why we put it here instead of putting them here. Just during the development and during the whole building the whole solution, it seems like we could have it here, but from the development point of view, it will be like hacking, because then we need to somehow provide that information to actions and then use that actions. And especially on the UI, imagine that you're configuring, I believe we have something here. Imagine you're configuring here, okay, if pipeline is run for main branch, and then I'm setting, okay, require a cluster image scan, and then this section will be automatically expanded with some information that you need to supply because you selected something here. For me, it's rather natural. Okay, I selected something here, and then I have additional options here that I need to add some information. What kind of scan should I need to provide on which cluster and so on?
Yeah, thanks for sharing those thoughts. Do you mind if I share my screen now to
share
my thoughts here on this? So one of the challenges is that we are supporting, so right now the branch selection is part of the rule. And maybe we should move this down to the actions. You know, if what you're saying, then we, you know, maybe we move this down to the actions and say, you know, require a SAST scan when the pipeline is run against the main branch or something like that. But it gets tricky because we have both pipeline rules here and we have scheduled rules. And I know right now for the first iteration, you built cluster image scanning in a way that it can be run as part of the pipeline. But actually in the UI, we don't even have a, you know, we never really had a notion of supporting that. It always was only going to be done via a schedule rule. And that's because when you're scanning production, it really is independent of the pipeline. It doesn't really have anything to do with the pipeline. And so scanning the production cluster really only makes sense on a scheduled basis. And so right now you can schedule a branch, you know, for DAST again, and you can pick these configuration options. But you're picking which branch up here in the rules, and that doesn't really apply for cluster image scanning. And so that's part of the reason why we were proposing to make the cluster selection up here in the rules, because that would take the place of the branch. You would replace selecting a branch. You know, you would pick either a branch or a cluster. And if it was a cluster, then that, you know, obviously DAST couldn't run in this case, so it needs some validation. But that's where you would run your container scanning against the production cluster. So I guess I was thinking about it less as a scanner configuration, because I know, like, from a backend perspective, it's like a DAST profile as part of the scanner's configuration, but I'm viewing it more as part of where it's being scheduled rather than part of the configuration. And I don't know that that's necessarily right, but I think if we do move the cluster selection down here, then it becomes a little bit tricky. Like, what do we do with the branch selector up here? And it starts to introduce some complexity and potentially some confusion for users, because the cluster image scanner has nothing to do with the branch.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, now I remember everything. Yeah, you know, I was 5 weeks off and I totally forgot about that. Yeah, okay. Yeah, it's clear for me. Still on the develop, like in the code, I will need to do some tricks to support that. But yeah, as well, if I had different vision for the UX, so it's good that it looks like that and not like my vision. So okay, that's great. Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know right now we're actually differentiating it. We're calling it a live container scan, but I think eventually we would just want to call it a container scan. You know, make it the same. It's container scanning. And the only difference is, are you running it in production, or are you running it, you know, as part of your pipeline, like locally? And you know, technically under the hood in the back end, it's two different things that we've built, but from the user's perspective, you know, they're running Trivy or they're running Gripe, right? It's one or the other. It's just where they're running it that is the difference.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, of course. I believe we'll have some edge cases whenever you're configuring a rule that you have either schedule a branch or schedule a cluster.
Right.
Then it will be tricky, but I believe we'll either limit that for now for the MVC or for initial iterations, and then we're gonna just add some rules and so on just to support all those cases. I believe we need to start small and then expand.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if users tried to schedule a scan against a cluster and they tried to schedule a secret detection scan, obviously that's not going to work. And so in the future, it'd be nice to just add in like some UI clarification in here. Like if I come in and I say, I want to schedule the cluster, this namespace to run daily at midnight and secret detection, it should say something here, by the way, this is not going to run per that schedule because it's not supported in production. So ideally we'd have some sort of linting or some sort of validation that comes into place, and you could still create this rule. It just wouldn't do anything. And that should be obvious. Right now, this policy preview says it does, but we would actually need to change that to do some validation and say, oh, by the way, only container scanning works for production rules. So you can create other rules, they just won't do anything.
So for the drop down, can we just remove the things which doesn't work? Like for example, if the condition set only for container scan, in the drop down there only show container scan. So then it's clear for user that they can only use that one.
We could. It gets tricky because we're giving users a lot of flexibility. We're giving them the freedom to chain lots of rules together with or clauses. So if in some cases, yes, we could intelligently limit it, but also if they said, I want to run this on the schedule, or I also want to run it, whenever the master branch, a pipeline is run against the master branch, then it gets tricky because you have all the options available, but some of the options are going to be applied per the schedule and some are going to be applied when the pipeline is run. And so we might just need to find an intelligent way to make that clear.
Yeah, then we need two options. When there's no or, then we can remove other options. When there is or, we need to show a message that this is only work for one of the or condition or something.
Yep, exactly. And some things like container scanning, because we support it for both, it's going to work for both. In the backend, it'll actually be scheduling both the regular container scan and the live cluster, cluster image scanner. But from the customer's perspective, it's one thing, it just works for both. So yeah, exactly. We'll need two conditions though. Alexander, I just noticed, is your hand up?
Yeah, I wanted to try out that feature. Can you go back to your prototype actually?
Yeah, sure.
And can you add a rule for a branch?
Yep.
So just a quick question here. I see for when you select a branch in the schedule, that's just going to run every time the branch runs, right? Or something gets merged.
The pipeline runs, yep.
And then for the cluster, you have to schedule a time.
Correct.
And if you change that time quick. Oh, I see. Cadence. Oh, right. Type pipeline. And then you have a schedule type. Interesting. Okay. And then if you can add a schedule type also for branches, and it looks very similar.
Correct. Yep. Yeah, we can add that one in here as well. So the main difference here, I'll even make this the same. Weekly Sunday 7. Right. So instead of, and I don't know what the exact YAML syntax is here. I think I've got it somewhat close, but I'm not great at YAML. Anyway, but it should give you a general idea, right? Somewhere in here, you're specifying which clusters, and then you're specifying the namespaces inside of those clusters. And then if it's a branch type scheduled rule, then you're specifying which branches you want to run it against.
Right. And so then right now, based on what you've configured, for like you've added a schedule. The schedule is going to run, but then the other pipeline and schedule for the branches are just like nothing for container scanning action, right?
So container scanning is actually the only one that works for everything.
Oh,
So
I see.
container scanning would actually run per all of these rules. But suppose it was a secret detection scan, secret detection could only work for this rule and this rule, and rules 2 and 3 here, because we can't run secret detection in production against a cluster yet. So secret detection would work for rules 2 and 3, container scanning would work for everything. So in these cases, suppose someone came in here and tried to run both. It's not in the prototype, but at some point we'll just have to have an intelligent message here that says, secret detection is going to work. And I don't know how we're going to word it. We'll have to figure that out, but it's going to work for these 2 rules, but not the first one.
So many cases.
Right. But I think we can handle that with some smart UX when we get closer to building out the front end for this feature.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, I think we already have some mocks with some kind of error messaging or limiting things in here somewhere. I can try to dig it up and find it. I think it's just like some small red text that falls inside of this rule. Sort of the idea to help clarify what it does and what it does not do.
Yeah, and then the humanized like explanation of what's going on will have. Oh yeah, look at that.
Yeah,
and
it does not do it correctly right now, so we'll have to adjust that.
Yeah, it might be easier to separate that preview out into each action. Like the container scan will run loopy loop, and then the secret scan will run, whatever it's going to run.
Right. Yeah, for sure. I mean, right now this thing is wrong because it says that it runs the secret detection scan against the production cluster, which it does not. But yeah, we'll play with that more. I mean, we're not up to this point yet, so once we get closer to actually developing this, we'll sort out some of these rough spots. But I think we can do that just with some better messaging in line and obviously making the policy preview accurate.
Cool. Makes sense. Thank you.
All right. Is there anything else to cover today? All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a good week.